Welcome to Talkin' Mets with Rob. Subscribe to the channel for all your New York Mets in-game live, pre-game, post-game, round-table podcast, and all the breaking news for our New York Mets. Enjoy the show and let's go Mets.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the NLCS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering, they're cheering, and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ballpark, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell! Give 'em a hand! And let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the NLCS Mets of New York town, of New York town.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to Mets Talk Live right here on the channel. And make sure you hit on that like button, everybody, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Mets fans, Mets fans, Mets fans. Our New York Mets are NLCS bound and are waiting for the winner of Dodgers Padres that will start game 1 on Sunday. And what a series it was for our New York Mets against the Philadelphia Phillies. If I'm going to be quite honest with you guys, it should have been a sweep. The Mets outplayed the Philadelphia Phillies. They outpitched, they outhit, and they outplayed fundamental baseball over the Philadelphia Phillies. Right? You heard the post-game reactions of the Philadelphia Philly players, right? Castellanos saying, well, no, they're not better than us, but they were better than us in this series. Whatever you want to take out of that one, which was kind of a jab to the Mets team, saying that we're not better than them, but they were better than us in this series, which is funny because how soon they forget that they were the team that wasn't better than anybody else in 2022, and they took it all the way to the World Series. So soon they forget that they were doing exactly what the Mets are doing 2 years ago, but I guess they weren't better than those other teams, but they kind of got lucky in those series. That's kind of what Nick Castellanos were saying in their post-game interview. Bryce Harper was just, Bryce Harper, right? Talked about they played better than us. We didn't execute. They got the big hits. They pitched better. So he kind of was just fair in the whole post-game interview. I'm not shocked the way they reacted when it came to doing what they're supposed to do and give the team credit that they were playing, because the Mets did outperform them. And, Castellanos and any Major League Baseball player should know that you don't play this game on paper, and that's why you play 27 outs every game, because anybody can win on any given Sunday. And they should know better, because they experienced that 2 years ago when they were the third wildcard team. They were not better than anybody else in the National League playoffs, and they ran all the way to the World Series in 2022. So, besides that, what a performance by Jose Quintana, right? The stats do not jump off the page. It doesn't, make you say, oh, look at that start. That was an amazing start. But when you watch the game and how he battled and continued to keep that team off balance at the plate, they just couldn't get much solid contact on Jose Quintana. He was absolutely outstanding. And once again, didn't give up any runs, right? Didn't give up anything. And that's where you continue to talk about why you want veterans in certain spots, right? You can see who's the mainstay and who are the guys on the mound in the big spot that really turn this game into what happened later in the game, right? Jose Quintana putting up zeros allowed Francisco Lindor in the sixth to be in that opportunity. Now, this game should have been over in the first 3 innings. The Mets left like 9 men left on base in the first couple of innings of the game. And when the Phillies finally broke through with that 1 run, you started to think, oh man, all the missed opportunities, all the runners in scoring position, all the runners on base that they didn't capitalize on. And the Phillies, basically a ground ball where Vientos made a mistake, got them the run. And that would have been a crappy way to go about it, because, let's be honest, the Mets had so many men on base, they couldn't get that big hit, which was basically what they've been doing throughout this entire postseason, was getting that big hit when it mattered the most. And, when you're getting later and later into the ball game, you start, getting concerned. Another good swing in the bat and it's over the wall, you're down by multiple runs. But good job by Quintana. Good job by the bullpen to keep it to 1 run. And there comes Francisco Lindor. Good at bats in the sixth that lead up to Francisco Lindor coming to the plate, ready to go. There was probably nobody else you probably wanted up in that situation other than probably Vientos, who's been, outstanding in this postseason. Probably the best hitter in the postseason for the New York Mets. But there was probably nobody you wanted up in that spot at home. Game 5 looming if you lose this game and Zach Wheeler on the mound, than Francisco Lindor. That is the guy you wanted up there in that spot. You just knew he was going to come through. Now, wishful thinking, the grand slam would be great before that at bat, right? It would be great. But you know what? Hit a ball in the gap, score 2 runs, possibly 3, clear the bases. But I said this to my dad when we were watching the game, and I felt this way. If the Mets even pushed through 1 run in that inning and they tied the game, I thought the floodgates were going to open and the Mets would have won that game, regardless if Lindor would have just tied the ball game instead of hitting the grand slam as he eventually did and crushed that ball to right center and, have Citi Field in complete chaos in Queens. And obviously 4-1 was the final score. It got very fishy in the 9th inning as Diaz walked the first 2 batters, and boy, oh boy, was that 9th inning nail biting. I mean, that's something that I just had my hand on my head. I didn't move positions. I was nervous to move, thinking it would have been bad juju, superstitious and all that craziness. But Diaz figured it out enough where he finally started throwing fastballs. And I don't know if you guys read the couple of stories that were from multiple reporters, but I saw the one from Andy Martino and other reporters confirmed it, that when they had that meeting on the mound with Hefner in the infield, it was the infield that told Diaz, throw your fastball. Your fastball is sharp. It's got a lot of movement. They will swing and miss. So Diaz took their advice, which, again, I always believe when Diaz has his fastball around the zone and it's got that type of movement, he's unhittable. When he gets cute and starts to fall in love with his slider, that's when he gets into trouble. So credit to the infield and the couple of guys that said, throw your damn fastball. It's got a ton of movement. They're trying to swing. They're trying to win a ball. They're trying to get back into this ball game, right? After those 2 walks, we know what was the goal for each one of those batters that were coming up in the 9th inning. They were trying to take Diaz deep. They weren't trying to work another walk. They weren't trying to, get 2, 3, 4 hits in a row to make this game closer or a tie game. They were trying to hit the ball over the wall. And how to exploit that is use their aggressiveness to your advantage. And that's exactly what Diaz did. And that's what Quintana did. Use their aggressiveness to your advantage. And that's what Diaz did in the bottom of the 9th. And no other than Kyle Schwarber with 2 men on and 2 outs, where we know he is the prolific power hitter in that lineup and has a ton of big hits and ton of big home runs in the playoffs for the Philadelphia Phillies. And, I really thought when Cody Clemens pinched hit, I was thinking, I'm like, oh God, come on, Diaz. Don't let Roger Clemens' son torture the Mets fan and break their hearts. And this guy's going to hit it over the wall. And 24 years since Roger Clemens in the World Series against the New York Mets, it's his son that breaks the hearts of Met fans and ties up this ball game. But he got the job done, struck him out. And, Kyle Schwarber, we got Marsh and then you got Schwarber. And with Kyle Schwarber, again, you know what he was looking for. And again, everybody after that 2 walks were trying to go yard. And you have to exploit that. You have to exploit that, right? If you can just get that fastball with that movement a little bit above the belt high, they're swinging for the fences. So they're going to have a little bit more of an uppercut swing. They're not just trying to flick the ball to left field or try to just get a base hit, which would have been very different for the Mets if they were just trying to get base hits. But as I said, every game, every pregame, every pregame before the game, I kept on saying, keep this team in the ballpark. They can't score a bunch of runs without the home run ball. They rely heavily on the 2-run homer, the 3-run homer to either get back into the ball game or take a lead in the ball game. That is their MO. That is their game. Keep them in the ballpark. They're not going to hit 4, 5 hits in a row to get in multiple runs in it. It's very rare. They did it once in this series, and that was it. And that was basically the end of the game in game 2. That was basically it. If you look at the rest of the 3 games, they had a hard time scoring multiple runs without the home run ball. And that's what won this Mets team this series. For the most part, they kept them in the ballpark in the games the Mets won. They didn't give them the multi-hit home run, the 2-run homer, the 3-run homer, because that can be damaging to a game. That was the goal right there. But make no mistake about it, the New York Mets outplayed the Philadelphia Phillies. And if you had time and if you wanted to enjoy the misery of the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia fans were trying to make every excuse under the book. The Mets got lucky. Remember after game 1, it was the shadows that played a role. Fans were saying that the Mets caught the Phillies at the best time. The Phillies are still the better team, which again is very irrelevant because they're still looking on paper and not exactly what is the flaw. That was the flaw with this team the last 3 seasons. Even when they were going on their runs, when they started to lose in the postseason and it started to get a little, little bit chippy with them, and it was concerning in those series over the last couple of seasons, they stopped hitting a home run ball. That's why they lost the World Series. That's why they lost game 6 and 7 against the Diamondbacks last year. And that is the reason why they lost to the New York Mets in the NLDS. And what did I say in post games? Google Mets NLDS. The New York Mets are still undefeated in the NLDS in their history since 1999. That's a fact. And on top of that, the Philadelphia Phillies are slowly going backwards year by year. Made the World Series, lost. Got to the NLCS, lost. NLDS this year, lost. And as I am going to say, and I said it already, next year is missing the playoffs. Because there's always a certain amount of time with the core, with a bunch of guys that we were having conversations about throughout this season, with the core of them possibly being broken up at the trade deadline if things didn't work out for the New York Mets, right? There's only a certain amount of years you can continue to roll with the same core guys. Because at some point, you have to change it up. You can't continue to, roll the same guys out there and expect different results. Regardless of who you bring aboard, the core guys are always what's going to matter. And you see in this series, right? Francisco Lindor is coming through. Pete Alonso came through in big moments, right? Brandon Nimmo, big moments. The core guys are going to be the main guys that are going to get you to where you need to be. The Mets wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their core having extremely important at-bats in the biggest moments of their postseason series in this postseason so far. So we can continue to talk about all of that. Once you start going backwards year by year, it starts to be tougher because each year you come back, now you go to the World Series. The next year, you expect to be in the World Series. The NLCS, you get there, you lose, you're expected to at least go back to the NLCS. Remember, Philly fans said before the series started that this team was World Series caliber. This was the team to get them to the World Series. They felt that, right? They know 2022 everything right had to happen in 2022 because they weren't the best. They weren't the best team in the National League. They were this year. They were one of the best teams in the National League. With them and the Dodgers. So they felt like this team over the last for 2022, 23, and 24 ended up being their best all-around team in 2024. They should have had what it took to get to the World Series because this team was probably, roster-wise, when, with the certain trades, the, certain signings, was going to help them get back to the World Series, but this time win it. That was their goal this year because they thought they had the right to. And listen, for the season, the way they ended it, well, they were the second best team in the National League. They should have thought that. But they did not show up in the NLDS. You can make any excuse under the book, but they didn't capitalize on the few mistakes the Mets actually made. Yeah, Greg, and I 100% agree with you, right? This was the best roster, right? That's not a lie. It's a fact. But again, as I said the whole time they're in a series, Philly fans seem to never realize that just because you have the better roster and the better record, that you just have the birthright to win a series just based on that. And I'm not saying it was you, Greg, but there was a lot of Philly fans, and you probably heard a lot of your Philly fans say that, oh, we were better, that we're better. This is not going to be a series. There was a lot of people that said that. But it's starting to be a trend now. This is 3 seasons, right? 2022 was a shocking year, right? They beat the teams they needed to beat. They were not the best team in the postseason. They were one of the last teams in a wild card, similar to the Mets this year. They made their run. They got to the World Series. They lost. Last year, they were a little bit better than the 2022 team. Got to the NLCS and lost both games at home in Game 6 and 7. This year was their best roster, and they didn't get out of the NLDS. And I said this is a team, and it starts to get in your head a little bit. I don't care if they admit it or not. And if Philly fans don't want to admit it, then you just don't want to believe it. It starts to get into your head. After the last 3 seasons, you're going backwards. It starts to get in that main core's head. And this is also a guy in Bryce Harper. And again, it's not one player that makes a difference in a ball game. You got to be multiple guys, right? That's how it works. But this is a guy in Bryce Harper that has been on many, many postseason games with 2 different teams, and they never won the World Series. They never got over the hump. And I don't believe it's a coincidence that once Bryce Harper left the Nationals, they won the World Series the following year. And even the Washington Nationals weren't even the best team in 2019. They were around the same mark where the Mets were, 11, 12 games under 500, and they went on an amazing run in the second half and ran with it throughout the playoffs and won the World Series. So I do believe this does get to your head. Even if they're still talented, it's still in the back of their minds. You don't think in this series, going back last year, losing game 6 and 7 at home, and then losing game 1 of the Mets, losing 3 in a row at home in the postseason, that shit gets to you. I don't care how tough the team is. I don't care how good you might feel about your team, right? The players on the Phillies, even after the walk-off win in game 2, they even said it in the post-game interview. Multiple guys said it. Castellanos said it. Harper said it. A couple other guys did say it as well. When he was like, how do you feel? They said, I don't know how to feel. I'm feeling excited, but I also feel relieved. That was Castellanos' words. Why did he say that? Because the comeback ability in that game alone from the New York Mets basically scared the hell out of them. That series should have been a sweep, and we all know it. They were relieved that they won game 2. It wasn't much as excitement as it was relief. And that's exactly what it was. It was relief that they won that ball game. The Mets had them chasing and chasing any type of success in this series that they were hanging on to. And that's just what happens. And I know there was going to be a few Philly fans that said that ball down the first baseline was a fair ball. I 100% agree with you. Greg Gift, you were ahead in game 1 most of the time, but you also had 2 hits, and that was Kyle Schwarber with that home run. So as much as you want to, stay, you were ahead most of the game. You also have to finish the game. The Phillies couldn't do that. And the Mets, yes, they did come back. But how soon you forget that that's what the Phillies did the last 2 seasons to go in their run, especially 2022. You had that comeback ability, right? You also have to finish games. And that's about it. That was the whole thing. And you didn't look, your offense wasn't good. What did you score? Let's see, 12 runs in this series? 12. This is a team that scored, around 5.5 to 6 runs per ball game this year? Well, if you do the math, they were scoring just over 3. You're not winning the postseason that way unless your pitching was lights out. And again, your pitching isn't very good. Besides Wheeler, Ranger Suarez pitched his ass off yesterday. He did everything he can. That was a guy that basically had a curveball and nothing else. And that guy battled his ass off. I can even say that he pitched better. I always love a pitcher that puts up zeros even when he doesn't have nothing. And Suarez only had his curveball. And it was beautiful to watch, even though obviously I wanted the Mets to win. As a baseball fan, that's always beautiful. The rotation is not very good. I'm sorry. Aaron Nola isn't very good. All right. I continue to say that guy, and listen, he's had big postseason moments, but I never trust Aaron Nola because I don't like pitchers that are either great or bad, and there's no in between. I hate those type of pitchers. And believe me, the Mets had enough of those over the years. But here's what it comes down to. The Mets pitched just a little bit better than the Philadelphia Phillies. Even though the Mets bullpen wasn't spectacular, they did the job more often than not than the Philadelphia Phillies. There's where you lost. Not only did the offense didn't show up, the Phillies bullpen that should have been on paper. This is another thing that Philly fans don't want to realize. On paper, you should have had a way better bullpen. Your bullpen was extremely solid this year. This bullpen actually had depth. And that was always concerning going into the series with the Phillies because I even said it. I thought the pitching advantage in the bullpen was going to the Phillies. I thought the way the Mets starting rotation has pitched over these last month and a half. Obviously, Wheeler, anytime you pitch Wheeler, you're going to have the advantage. But I always thought the Mets had every opportunity to pitch as well as everybody else in their rotation. But their bullpen, every high leverage guy gave up runs in this series. The bullpen was absolutely garbage for the Philadelphia Phillies. It was downright embarrassing how they performed. They could not get big outs except for game 2. There was a few. There was nobody in that bullpen that was a high leverage reliever for the bullpen for the Phillies that were able to get big outs when they need it. They got it a couple of times, but most of the times they gave up multiple runs. It was bad, really, really bad. But that wasn't the only thing. The Phillies did not score. They left a ton of men on base. They couldn't get the big hit. And as I said over and over again, keep them in the ballpark and they don't score many runs. Their game is 2 3-run homers. That's the way it's been for the last couple of seasons. The way they win games, if you go back to a lot of the games they won this season, it was because of the home run ball. And in this series, the Mets won in multiple ways. They won game 1 by basically hitting a ton of singles. They won game 3 with a couple of home runs, a couple of singles. They won yesterday with 1 swing and a bat. And they came back multiple times in game 2 with the home run ball. The reason why the Mets are dangerous, and if you gave Philly fans truth serum, was because they can beat you in multiple ways. It's dangerous. They can beat you with the long ball, and they can beat you with singles. They can beat you with multiple hits in an inning to put runs up on the board. That is exactly what they did in this series. And they also did that against the Brewers as well. In game 1 against the Brewers, they singled them to death. Obviously, game 3 was the home run ball. And that's why this team is extremely dangerous. And this is not saying that they're going to beat either the Padres or the Dodgers, who they'll face on Sunday. We know we're going to end up in the state of California. It's going to be somewhere in Southern California, maybe a little north of Southern California or a little bit deeper down in Southern California. So, but you cannot be not confident in this Mets ball club. There's something special going on, and yes, you need some luck. And that's the other thing that frustrates me with Philly fans when they talk about the Mets like they weren't the team only 2 years ago that were doing the exact same thing, and it took everybody on your team performing to make that run, just like the Mets are doing now. Everybody is doing their job to make this run. And you need a little bit of luck involved as well. You need a couple of calls to go your way. You need a little bit of luck because that's what happens when things are going right for your team. Things happen. And the Mets are playing as well as they possibly can as a team. And I do think it helps that they've been playing basically playoff baseball for about a month now. Ever since the calendar turned to September, it was like a playoff game every single day. And it all started in the last series of the year against the Brewers, where the Mets had to battle for a wild card spot to the very, very end. It took the doubleheader in Atlanta that really started the magic for this Mets team. And this has only been, a 10, 11-day period? In 10, 11 days, the Mets did winning that doubleheader and hitting in heroics with Francisco Lindor. It took a huge home run by Pete Alonso to win Game 3 after they were down 2-0, hitting the ball against one of the best closers in baseball. Then it was Francisco Lindor in the bottom of the 6th, bases loaded, down by 1. Mets stranded about 500 runners in that game yesterday. And Francisco Lindor, with his sweet left-handed swing, didn't even look like he swung hard. That ball jumped off his bat. When he first hit it, I knew it was going to be in the gap. It wasn't going to be caught. It was like, okay, we know we tied the game at the very least, even if there was a miraculous catch. But is it 2 runs? Is he going to clear the bases? No, it cleared the wall. Pandemonium in Citi Field. Grand slam. Mets lead 4-1, but the Mets still had 9 outs to go to make it to the NLCS, and they did just that. It's miraculous what they've done. And this team has earned everything they've earned in this postseason. They deserve all of it. They played their ass off. When they needed the big out, they got it from their pitchers. When they needed the big hit, they got it from their offense. And there's just something about this team. Now, that doesn't mean that they can go into the NLCS and all that is going to happen for us to win the NLCS, right? They still got to play well. They still got to limit their mistakes and play good fundamental baseball. I always believe this. If you limit your mistakes and play good fundamentals, you always have a shot of winning the game. You always have a shot of winning the series. Because every time the Phillies made a mistake, the Mets made them pay. The Phillies, when the Mets limited their mistakes, but when they did make mistakes, the Phillies did not come through more often than not. In this series that's coming up, whoever we play, the Dodgers or the Padres, and we're going to talk about that right now, as the New York Mets are NLCS bound, have the next couple of days off, as Game 1 is Sunday against either LA or San Diego. Who do you want to play? Now, I don't like to play this game, right? I think if you're really truthful, you shouldn't be worried about who you're going to play. Because if the Mets have continue to play like they have, pitching, clutch hitting, it doesn't matter who you play. You and the other team still got to do their job. And it's always going to come down who makes the least amount of mistakes and who gets the big hits when it matters most. And of course, obviously, the pitching. Now, if you look at the rosters and you see the problems that the Los Angeles Dodgers have with their starting rotation, with their bullpen, it's obvious that you would like to play the Dodgers. But I want to make sure Mets fans realize that, did you see what the Dodgers did to the Padres the other day, or yesterday, excuse me, where they, what was it, 8-0? They basically pitched an opener in that game when their series was on the brink. They pitched an opener. They used like 7 or 8 guys to win that ball game. We forget how dynamic the Dodgers can be offensively, where they can will their team to win games just by their offense. They've done it all season with the pitching that has been suspect for the majority of the year, with a ton of injuries, with the bullpen being in shambles. They still won a lot of their games by just beating up people. Now, you could say, well, Rob, if you're pitching well, they're going to have a hard time scoring those runs, and they can't keep teams off the board. True. Absolutely true. And with the Dodgers, if you look past the 5th batter in their lineup, it doesn't scare you. But that doesn't mean those guys still can't come true, right? You still got to execute when you pitch. I know why a lot of people don't want the Padres, because they're a team that has been one of the hottest teams in baseball in the second half, along with the New York Mets. They obviously got the pitching. They got a very good rotation. They got a very good bullpen. And we know what their lineup can do. It's basically been, some of Machado and everything about Fernando Tatis. He's basically carrying the San Diego Padres. He's batting like he has like a 2,000 OPS. Like, the guy's been absolutely just money in the postseason. So, of course, you worry about that team. But you also got to understand that this is a San Diego Padres team that has also, when it gets deeper into a ball game, into a series, into a postseason, they've also have trouble closing things out as well. They've had the tendency to choke in the playoffs the last couple of seasons. Right? They seem like they were going to be that miracle team of 2022. They got picked off by the Philadelphia Phillies. Last year didn't end too well for them. And, it's a similar thing with the Phillies, even though when it comes to the San Diego Padres, right? This seems like the best roster that the Padres have. This is even when they traded Juan Soto. But they seem like they fit well together. Their roster is dangerous. Their pitching is dangerous. Their bullpen is dangerous. Their offense could be dangerous with the guys on that team. But they're also a team that also has come up small in a series, in a postseason, that has knocked them out of the playoffs. So you can look at it any way you want to. You could say, I want the Dodgers, and we all know the reasons why. But I wouldn't be afraid of I'm not going to go into a series being afraid of a team. Because as well as the Mets played, I still believe this. If you limit your mistakes, play fundamental baseball, you have a chance to win. And the Padres, even though they have dynamic hitters in that lineup, they are very, very prone to the strikeout. And they're not as similar to the Phillies, as they rely on the home run ball to score runs, because they could hit you to death as well. They do rely, I would say, about 70% of their runs with the home run ball. They are a high strikeout team, hitting team, and they can hit the ball over the wall, but they also can hit you to death, even though that's not exactly the way they go about it. They hit their home runs. They love them multiple home runs, 2-3 run homers. That's how they beat teams as well. They've done this in this playoffs. They did it in the wild card round. They're doing it in the NLDS. Obviously, they got their ass beat at home, by the way, with 8 different pitchers the Dodgers threw out there, as basically having an opener, because the Dodgers really didn't have a starter. And this is the team that won their division and could set up their rotation. So they can easily score 8 runs, but they can also score 0 or score 1 run, basically like they did yesterday, as it was no contest against the Dodgers in San Diego. Now they're going back to LA, and this benefits the Mets in a way. You could say, well, whoever wins gets the momentum going into the NLCS because they'll only have 1 day off, as Game 5 is tomorrow. But both of them don't have to travel. They can stay in California, right? They're what, a couple hours from each other, or LA and San Diego. So San Diego's got to take a quick trip back home to San Diego. That's basically it. And if LA wins, they stay home. So do you think that I think this Mets team, people can talk about momentum, having too many days off. This Mets team basically didn't have a day off or more than 1 day off in about 3 weeks with the way their schedule turned out. They've been on the road and basically playing every single day for about 3 weeks. Now that they're finally home, I think it's extremely good for this team. It keeps Lindor resting a little bit more, getting that treatment for his back, because as well as he hasn't, before yesterday, he's had 3 RBIs. He was batting like 208 with no home runs, right? So he wasn't being as productive as we've seen Lindor. He hasn't been that good in the post in especially in this series, right? Before that swing last night. You can look at it as his back was aching because who knows? That back can flare up at any moment. You give them rest. You give everybody in your bullpen. You will have everybody available for at least the first 2 games of this series because of these 3 days off. You got the rest of the bullpen. You can set your rotation any way you want, basically, except for Quintana, who pitched Game 4. But you can set up your rotation the way you want it, starting from Game 1. That's helpful. And the lineup, you always worry with days off, will they get cold? But I just feel like this team, even if they start out cold in the game, they're going to start warming up. And with their late inning heroics, it seems like they will find their way to put runs up on the board every given game. So, well, Greg, you did say that the Phillies were going to murder the Mets, right? You basically said the Phillies are going to beat us, right? You also said that, right? So you could say we're going to get murdered in that series. Well, I mean, you can just continue to say it. So we'll see. And Greg, I did read it again. I do apologize. You kind of worded it wrong, but I got what you were saying, right? The Mets do have the magic, right? I also seen the Padres, lineup get shut down by not really good pitchers for the Dodgers yesterday. So it's going to be very interesting. But I think the Mets really needed these days off. I really do believe that. I think they basically had 1 day off over the last 2.5 weeks. Like it's been crazy, right? All the traveling they've been doing, basically on the road for 2 weeks, right? To have them relax a little bit, get everybody healthy, set up your rotation, rest your bullpen, and then go into the NLCS, wherever you might be, LA or San Diego. Play the fundamentals, do your job, and limit the mistakes. I truly believe this, and I said this ever since the Wild Card Series started. Do your job, don't try to do too much, limit the mistakes, and play good fundamental baseball, and you're going to have a chance to win against anybody. So, guys, 3 days off. We already had 1 today. We got 2 more on Friday and Saturday. Sit back, relax. We'll see who we're going to face tomorrow. Enjoy the American League games today. The Mets are the first team to punch their ticket to the National League, or the Championship Series and will face the Padres, or the Dodgers in the NLCS. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to Mets Talk Live here on the channel. Probably do another show tomorrow. Maybe I'll do a show with Chris just to kind of be ready to see who we're gonna face. And Saturday, I'm really hoping, guys, we can do a roundtable. I really want to get a roundtable prior to the NLCS. It's been something that we tried to do after the wild card series. Schedule didn't work out. We tried to do it before the Phillies series, didn't work out. It was just scheduling has sucked. But we're going to do our best. I'm going to definitely do a show tomorrow if it's by myself or with Chris, and hopefully do another show to preview the series against whoever we face. We will know tomorrow. Preview of that series on Saturday. So with that said, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Oh my God. Of course, the freaking alarm clock goes off on my laptop. So guys, with that said, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, enjoy your Friday, and of course, enjoy your Saturday. You get a almost relaxing week and until Sunday comes on Sunday night. Thank you for tuning in to Mets Talk Live. Mets beat Philadelphia 3-1, beat them in 4. Party at Citi Field. That place was jumping, crazy, so much fun. Magic is in the air in Queens. Let's continue it. OMG to 0-5, as Gary Cohen said. 11 games under 500 in May. The best team in baseball since the end of May. They're going on a miraculous run in the playoffs, and they're only 8 wins away to become a World Series champion. But there is a lot of work to do, Mets fans, and they all know it. With that said, have a good night, guys. Let's go, Mets, and I'll see you tomorrow for another Mets Talk Live on another off day during the postseason. Have a good night, guys. Let's go, Mets.
Welcome to Talkin' Mets with Rob. Subscribe to the channel for all your New York Mets in-game live, pre-game, post-game, round-table podcast, and all the breaking news for our New York Mets. Enjoy the show and let's go, Mets.